Good evening. It is 5 p.m. and I am calling the Public Safety Committee meeting to order. I'm Rob Watton, Chair, along with Council members Kara Christensen and Council member Catherine Cotton. And we also have staff in attendance as well as Mayor Ross and Clerk Garrett, if you wouldn't mind noting the attendance for the record. Yes. Our first order of business is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And is there any changes to the agenda tonight?
No.
Hearing none, we'll approve the agenda as presented. Next, we'll move on to public comment. If you're in the room in person, we'll give you the opportunity to speak on matters related to public safety, whether it's on tonight's agenda or not. Seeing no one, unless somebody from staff has anything that they'd like to add, we'll close the public comment at this time. If you are watching us remotely, you're always invited to send the clerk, the city clerk, or myself your comments, and we can have those read into the meeting as well. So we're always open to public comments. The next order of business is to approve the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from June 17th, 2024?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Cotton, second by Councilmember Christensen. Any other additions, changes, corrections to the minutes? Having none, we will approve the minutes as presented. Next, we're moving on to the purchase of one police SUV to replace prisoner van AB 24-083. Captain Horace. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Council members, mayor, city manager. As y'all remember, this was prior to me starting with the city. In September of last year, the police department had a transport van. That vehicle was sold after approval. And it was a 2018 Ford, I believe, and we're looking to replace that vehicle with a Ford Explorer, put back into our fleet. In doing so, that vehicle had been sold at auction. It was part of the joint venture with our contract with the city of North Bend. And in looking at the price of a new Ford Explorer SUV equipped out, we're looking at a total of about $84,443. As you look deeper into where those funds would come from, we sold that as the transport van for $35,000. There's approximately $33,000 in the ER&R fund, and then we would need an additional $16,443 from the for approval from y'all from the general fund to purchase this. The SUV we're looking at getting would be very similar to what we're already driving. We're looking at black to match the rest of them, and you know, kind of equipped similarly to the needs that we have at this time. Happy to answer any questions for y'all on that.
Council members, we'll start with Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you. So it's usually standard practice, at least it's my understanding, to move forward with the replacement of vehicles in accordance with their schedule so that we don't have to basically transfer funds from elsewhere or take out any debt in order to do it. I know that this is a slightly different situation since we sold the prison van and now we're doing a new vehicle, but I just had some questions on the timing of that, whether it's important to do it now, since I understand that the prison van wasn't being used consistently previously, whether we really need another vehicle at this point.
So we reassigned when we took the transport van out, we reassigned one of the captain's car over to that vehicle because it's an unmarked car. The old captain's vehicle. That has now required us to take one of the patrol vehicles and use it as an administration car.
Okay.
And as we start to, do our vigorous hiring, keeping those same numbers of our fleet is kind of crucial as we're, right now we're training 5 new officers who will end up going into cars and things like that. So timing is not, the sell of the one car was not in line with our normal schedule.
Mhm.
And so now we're trying to look at how to get that in. I know we have a big schedule for next year in replacement of cars, if I remember right. So that's one of the things we're looking at. Plus, this is a joint venture between the 2 cities in this car because of the contract. So reallocating that money back into a car makes the most sense in versus distributing funds between the 2 cities.
Follow up to that question, sir. Will this be, the transport van was obviously exclusively for that purpose. Would this have more utility for
So
the?
this one, because of the cost, cars have gone up, obviously, as we all know. This
Right.
car is going to be more simplified to keep it within a reasonable cost in an off year. The previous captain's car is going to stay as our transport vehicle. That's what it's been transformed into. So this car will allow us to take the cars that have been moved out of patrol, give those back to patrol, and then this one be put back in place. So we're not pulling from patrol to operate on an administrative level.
Okay, so you're going to be utilizing
Yes.
this one
Yes.
more than you would have the van.
Yes,
Perfect.
by far.
Okay, thank you.
I
Yes, City
believe-
Administrator Chambliss.
I believe Captain Haracy might have misspoke just a little bit. This vehicle replaces the prisoner transport van that will be used for transporting prisoners. Otherwise, we cannot use the prisoner transport
Right.
funds to pay for it. So
Oh,
this,
okay, thank you. for
the issue with the
clarification.
prisoner transport van was size of
Right.
the vehicle. So by downsizing the vehicle, the operator's claims that I can't go into the nature of those claims, but those will be resolved.
Okay, okay, thank you for the clarification. Councilmember Cotton.
How many, between Snoqualmie and North Bend, how many prisoner transports are done like weekly? Do you have an approximation or monthly or?
Off the top of my head. Well, we did one this morning on our
Okay.
way in, so we're probably looking.
It's under 10 in a week.
And so we've got just the transports out of the city. Let's just say we have just under 10. Let's say it's somewhere in the neighborhood between 5 and 8. Then we also have the transports from those that are in jails, such as those that we're transporting from King County back to Issaquah Court for their hearings for our court, or from Kent Jail, where we have been going almost weekly to pick up an individual who's there and bringing them back to court, or RJC, or wherever they might be, or for those transports that we take that are committed that we send to Sunnyside.
Yeah.
For our long-term commits. So it is going to be a very utilized vehicle. It's not just the transports on the arrest. It's transports for those that have already been in custody and are bringing back to court and then have to take them back to the facilities they're being housed in.
Does the vehicle also have emergency lights and sirens?
It'll be equipped with like
Equipped.
siren box.
So it
um,
can potentially be used by, well, not by patrol, but
It can be used for like, if we
other-
need to for traffic or something like that for special events, just like we did with the van at times, or with the current car that the transport officer is using now.
Okay.
We'll use it for those special events because it does have lights in it.
Okay, so we use for other things as needed.
Councilmember Christensen.
Yeah, two quick questions. You'd mentioned Sunnyside. Are we still utilizing the prisoner transport van that comes out on Fridays for the longer distance hauls to that jail?
Yes, we're still utilizing all their services.
Okay,
When I say transports out there, for instance, we had one that a couple weeks ago where we had to go pick them up because they got a bed date for treatment. And in those cases, they will not transport, so we have to drive there to get them. Simply because that's outside of the commitment of the sentence. And if they agree to get a bed date and it's on the west side, then we will transport them back here and arrange that transport or take them directly to treatment if need be.
okay, that makes sense. And then my second question, I saw that there was $258 for first aid and trauma. I just wanted to make sure that there's adequate PPE and whatever additional upfitting would need to happen for the prisoner transport.
Yes, so all of our vehicles, we are currently, after getting our LEMAP review back,
Mhm.
are currently being furnished with additional PPE
Great.
in addition to what they are originally equipped from by Public Works when we get them. All the cars are being accounted for in that, and have purchased a few extra just to make sure we have enough supply to replenish and use.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you much for your presentation. Okay, moving on to our next item. And we are going to have a very high level discussion on the next item, knowing that, there's certain things we may want to set aside. And this is AB 24-085. Snoqualmie Police Association Collective Bargaining Agreement. And for those listening in, the reason for that is whenever it's personnel related, that those items are not discussed openly, other than the fact we're looking at top lines, the amount of expenditures. And with that, I believe we have the police chief online. Is that correct?
I think this is gonna be a Drew and Mike show.
Okay. Mr. Boutte.
Well, I'll start. So after about 7 or 8 months of negotiations, it all kind of blurs together. We have a tentative agreement with the police union. And this agreement addresses some of our desires and also some of their desires. Drew can go through the nitty-gritty details and percentages because I don't want to shoot from the hip on those. I'll turn it over to Drew to talk about the actual changes to the contract.
So let's just kind of go through some of the highlights of the actual contract that's before you today. The term of this agreement is January 1, 2024 through December 31st of 2026. We have settled, as you can see, on a 3-year agreement. The new agreement accounts for an 8% COLA in 2024, a 1 to 3.5% COLA for 2025 plus 1%. So depending on the CPIW June to June for the Seattle, Tacoma, and Bellevue area, as well as a 3.5% COLA for 2026. The new agreement also includes a 12-hour shift schedule effective January 1 of 2025, which replaces the current 10-hour shift schedule plus 2 hours of mandatory overtime. So inevitably, the savings the city is going to see potentially through this is through a reduction in overtime. And that will help to kind of compensate us for any sort of COLA increases that are going to come through. In addition to that, there's an education incentive pay that's now going to be paid out as a percentage of the employee's base rate of pay instead of a flat monthly amount for an associate degree or a bachelor's degree. In addition, the longevity pay incentive has changed as well, which will now include a monthly amount of 8% for those employees who have worked for the city for more than 20 years. And in addition to that, as well as on January 1 of 2025, employees that are required to work a shift that begins on designated city holiday will be paid at 1.5 times for the entire shift. And in addition to that, those are more the economic kind of items as a part of this overall that's going to impact us financially. But there's probably some other kind of changes as well as part of this agreement. And so I'm happy to, if anyone else wants to jump in after I mention that, to please do so. And so finally, much time has been spent working through the entire agreement to bring it up to date with current labor laws and standards and to make it easier to read and interpret. So it's also been one of our objectives regarding this. In terms of the budget impacts overall, we are asking for, or we'll come back with an agenda bill asking for a $176,000 appropriation increase to our budget for the 23-24 biennial budget. As you mentioned, the change in the shift schedule happens in 2025. And so consequently, our anticipated impact for that would actually bring us back into alignment with what we budgeted and forecast for 25 and 26. So in essence, we do think that this is a pretty important win for the leadership overall. Not only are we concerned about the financial impact, which I think is certainly with the approval of this would be certainly helpful for us overall. But in addition to that, it's going to help us to retain and recruit police officers, which I think a lot of cities are struggling with. And that's something that we intend to accomplish through this agreement as well. So I think with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair. If they have any questions.
Thank you much. I was excited when I read through this. I think it gives a couple things. One is predictability, is being able to know that our officers are not relying on that overtime, that we can predict what the costs are. Secondly, we always budget for full staffing. The reality is when you have 29 employees, you end up with vacancies. And so even though that we have this small margin of difference in what we budgeted overall, I think that it leaves us in a very good place because we know that we don't reach that full maximum point. I think those are two very important things, and obviously we through this negotiation that it meets the union's requirements as well. And so I think it's a great win for all of us and gives a predictability that our partners over in North Bend, I'm sure, were anxious to see. So with that, I'm going to open it up for other council members first and then from the administration. Questions, comments, high level. Councilmember Cotton.
Just a general, because I didn't see it in the previous contract, but the specialty pay for a higher level of training, is that something new then?
No,
Okay.
that is not new. There is one added specialty to the list overall. I can't recall what that specialty is, but
Was it the
It's-
radar, LiDAR?
That was LiDAR.
Yeah.
LiDAR, okay. All right, that's basically what I wanted to know is, because I think that's a strong point in retention as well as they get additional certification that they get something as a reward for that.
Right. Excellent. Councilmember Christensen, do you have
I-
anything?
I have a few additional questions, but I could probably ask them at a later time.
Okay, very well.
Thank you.
Administration? Thing?
It's a good I think it's a good contract for both the police and the cities. I'm very
Yeah.
pleased with it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all those who worked on it. Right. Moving on to the next item, and that's the Fire Department Annual Report. Chief Bailey, come on up.
Hey, one question.
Oh, Councilmember, I'm sorry.
Deputy
Clerk.
Secretary. Just so the clerk knows, as far as the AB 2483, the police SUV and the SPA
Ah.
CBA, that can move on to the non-consent agenda, right, for July? 22nd?
Non-consent agenda
Right.
for both items.
yeah, just
Yes,
wanted
thank you.
clarification.
I should have made note of that, unless there's any objection. Hearing none. They will both go on non-consent. Chief Bailey.
Good evening. So I wanted to bring this forward to the Public Safety Committee just to show you a lot of this information is information you've already seen through our quarterly accreditation reports. There is some new information I want to highlight to you. This hasn't been published yet. The idea will be that it will be published on the city website once we're completed. So, I do apologize that you only saw it today. So please, if there's anything that you have any questions about, or anything that you want to discuss, we can either talk about tonight, or time permitting, we can always, I can meet with you at a later time. Since you haven't had a full time to read through the whole document. But what I wanted to do is just kind of go through and highlight some of the things, like I said, some of the things that you haven't seen before as the Public Safety Committee, some of the new features or some of the new facts or data that's inside of it. Let me just move that so I can see my screen there. So it starts out with just the chief's message was really just a summary of what we've done through the year and what the next couple of pages are, just kind of highlight some of the things that that we talk about later in the report. So we start off with our responses. 1572 is where we ended for 2023. So it gives a display there of the types of calls that we go on. 56% of those are medical calls, and then it breaks it down further to fire, EMS, hazardous conditions, hazmat type calls, service calls, good intent, and false alarms. So as typical with most fire departments, EMSs are by far the biggest type of call that we respond to. That was a decrease of about 2.4% from last year. Last year we ended at 1611. So we did go down just a little bit from the previous years, but you can see there on the incident count total that we have, we started in 18 at 1171. We dipped down a little bit in 2020 during COVID. And then it has it went up from there, big jump in 21 and 22, and then it kind of leveled out this year a little bit by going down just a little bit. Next thing to highlight is just incidents by day of the week. I think it's kind of interesting to see that for the most part, we're pretty, day of the week is pretty similar across there. Our highest is on Fridays and lowest is on Sunday. When we have our calls during the week. And then we also have the incidents by time of day. And as you can expect, we don't have as many in the middle of the night when people are sleeping. But right around the middle of the day is where we kind of jump up for the most of our call volume is around in the 90s, 100. And then it dips down overnight, when people are sleeping.
Councilmember Christensen.
Thanks. Chief, any idea what the breakdown is on incidents? I saw that there was a peak at 10 a.m. that seemed much higher than the rest of it, other than looking at 1 p.m. or about the time people would be leaving the office. So it seemed odd for a mid-morning.
Yeah, I mean, there's no real thing that we can look at as to what type of calls. If it was a little bit earlier in the morning, I'd say it's because as people wake up, they start to find, if you're not feeling well overnight, and then as you wake up, you start to call. So it could be from that, but from what I'm aware of, I can't really pinpoint exactly why it would be 10. Other than it's just, again, as people are starting to wake up and start moving around a little bit more, they start figuring out, hey, I've dealt with this all evening. I've dealt with this weird feeling. And so now it's time to go in and call somebody about it or to get into the emergency room.
Okay, thanks.
Response times, we just I put in a table that we use for our accreditation, but you can see there at the top, we averaged incidents inside the city here with 6 minutes and 42 seconds is what we had for city responses. And the annual report focuses mostly on just the city, doesn't necessarily, it does include numbers for mutual aid, but the response time is just for the city limits. And then we just show down below there, you can see the history of our response times for fire. We included the low risk for fire because that's the majority of our fire responses, and then the medium for medical, which is usually just going to be your basic BLS, basic life support medical call. And that just shows you a running total of our call times from 2019 up until now. For accreditation, we use a five-year cycle. So those are the tables from our accreditation report. Next, we go into our property loss, or we really like to focus on is the save part of it. So we just had a breakdown of where we were for this year. 2019 was the highest total we have, which was a $972 $100 loss. This year we were close, and really it has to do with fires. If you look over at the history of it, we usually don't have more than 1 or 2 fires in the city, and usually when we have a house fire, that's where we're going to have a big loss. And so really this one was from the series of house fires that we had in early March of 23, the lithium battery fires. That's where the majority of the property loss, the fire loss was on that one. But as you can see, the one that we like to focus on is, although we did lose $878,000, just over $878,000 of property and contents, we had $5,671,701 in property at risk. And so 84.5% is what we saved and that's really just looking at the fire calls we had. And you just total up what the cost is of the house, the contents, and then subtract any losses. And the loss comes from, we have a formula that we use, the firefighters will put it in based on the content loss as a percentage of how much the house is worth off of the King County records. And then we also look at the property loss as it comes back from our King County fire investigator, the one that does the official report. We use their, if it differs between what we have, we usually go with theirs because they're the experts on the fire loss. So that's where those numbers come from. And that's the King County Sheriff. They do all of our investigations in the city just because thankfully we don't have a lot of fires. So we wouldn't have somebody in our department that would be trained and knowledgeable to do those investigations. So the King County Sheriff does a great job for coming in and doing on call those investigations for us. The next one here, which you probably haven't seen because it's not part of our accreditation, it is part of the monthly reports, but we talk a little bit about the department training, go over how the consortium works, how we work with the South King County Consortium, talks about some of the highlights that we had this year, in 2023, adding 4 new career firefighters, which were replacements for retirements and people that left the department. And talking about the hours, you can see we had 6,697 hours of training in 2023, which was significant over 2022, which was 4,360. And we just attribute this to doing a better job of tracking our training through the consortium, and also because of all the training that the firefighters went through with the 4 probationary firefighters. There's a lot of training that occurred with that. There's a lot of crew training. So not only did the probationary firefighters go through the training, the crew had to help them with it, which is good for the crew too, because then you get to go back and refresh some of your skills. Some of the best way to train yourself is to teach it to somebody else. So that's where we attributed a lot of the hours and the bump up from last year for the training hours. And then we show the category, just shows you where we spend most of our time in training. In this one, it's a little bit flopped from the response. As in, you see, we spend a lot of time, 34% on fire training, 30% on EMS. And really the reason why we spend a lot of fire training is it's one of those high risk, low frequencies. We don't do it very much because we don't have many fires here in the city. So it's one of those skills that we want to practice to make sure we're ready. So the EMS and the fire take up the majority of it. And then you can see the other categories around the pie chart there. And the last little bit just talks again a little bit more about what the consortium does for us. Fire department finance, so we just threw a little bit in here about the budget, shows what the budget was, and this is for the public, just what the budget was for the fire department, what it increased from the previous year, and then added in there how we were underspent by 4.4% in 2023. Most of that was taken up, most of the savings was taken up with our overtime budget, which was, because of our staffing shortages, that took up a lot. So as usually it's lower than, or it's higher than 4.4%, but this year with our increased overtime budget, we didn't get as much underspending as we have in the past. Graph there that shows what it has been over the years. Next down is community risk and reduction in outreach. And again, this is probably something that you've seen pieces of this, but not all together. So we talked about in 23, we taught over 45 structured classes to 1,433 students for 96 hours of instruction. And this doesn't take into account going out to things like Big Truck Day or things like that. These are the actual classes, the first aid, the CPR, the station tours. That's where we were able to keep the numbers. And so we just put some statistics in there just to let people know the public CPR and first aid classes. We only had we had 8 of those just because we didn't do them the whole year. Just because staffing challenges, we didn't have the instructors to teach all the classes. We talked about the people that were taught for that. A big one for us is the high school CPR. You can see we went through 400 students there, just over 400. We've been teaching those classes for 25 years since I've been here. And now it's actually part of the curriculum that you have to have a CPR card, AED card to be able to graduate. So I think it's a really good partnership we have with the school where we go in and help them out with that because they don't have the instructors for it. Stop the Bleed, and then the opioid education classes. We taught a couple of those in 23. We've taught even more in 24. That's a really popular class that we've had that Robert Angersano's been teaching. I think it's real beneficial. So I think next year in 24, you're going to see a big jump up in the numbers for that opioid class. And then the station tours, we had some down there. We had more. We probably didn't keep track as good as track of it we have in the past, just because we transitioned through 3 different people in charge of tracking the station tours as people went in and out of the department. So that's one of our focuses for this year, is to be a little bit better with tracking the station tours, to make sure that we adequately cover how many people come through the station. And then we just list some of the events, just like I mentioned, the big truck day, the Easter egg hunt, Santa Claus, holiday tree lighting, just put in some of the events that the firefighters do throughout the year. Fire inspections, this is information that you've seen in the quarterly report. It just really goes over how many types of inspections we do and the types of violations we find. One thing to point out is we changed this year. We used to do every single business, was done annually. And that was, as the city has grown and we've added more businesses, it's just not realistic to do that anymore. And the best practice is really to set up a schedule based on the type of hazard. So for example, the schools are going to get checked every year. The Salish is going to get checked every year. Some of those high occupancy ones, but some of the other ones, there's a breakdown that they use from the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Agency, that talks about the types of occupancy. So we've changed it now to we do a low risk every 3 years, a medium risk every 2, and then a high risk once it's still done annually. And it's a benefit, I think, for the department that we still do these inspections, because it gets the firefighters out in the buildings. So we know exactly what we're going to find at 3 o'clock in the morning, dark 30, and we have a fire or something inside of one of these buildings. We've been in there multiple times. The firefighters know exactly where the hydrants are located, where the doors are, where the exits are. So I think it's a benefit that we do these inspections, and we do it as a partnership with the building department. We use John Cooper. He's the subject matter expert. If the guys have questions about what they're seeing, if it doesn't make sense, we reach out to him. Or if we have trouble, if we have a violation, we give them time to fix it. If it goes where they haven't fixed it, a second violation, then we turn it over to the building department to follow up on. So it's still done in conjunction with our building department. We work side by side with them to get those completed. We have a section here that talks about volunteerism. Last year we ended the year with 12 EMS volunteers. Usually that's a low number for us. Usually we're right around 18 to 20. And the last couple of years, we've lost a lot of people that have moved out of the city, have moved on. We're actually in the process of building that up. I think I've told you we have 5 people going through the process right now, 5 new EMTs that hopefully are going to start here in August. They're just finishing up their medical exams. And so we're going to try and get that number back up to where it needs to be. But you can see there, I think this is really important to point out, 3,361 hours that the volunteers put in. You can see there the number of duty shifts, the number of emergency responses that they went on, total number of drill nights that they spent, and then total hours of community events. So I think it's important to point out what our volunteers do for the city. Even with the low number we have right now, they're putting in a lot of work. And then we just have some stuff in there that talks about how that equates out to a full-time position for a firefighter. When you look at the hours they put in, they can be considered about 1.3 of a full-time firefighter, the actual hours. And then we talk a little bit about the savings that the city sees from that in regards to having the volunteers. I mean, we do compensate our volunteers. They do take some of the budget in regards to equipment and training and things like that, but it does create a savings for the city in regards to them being able to do some of those things that we would either have to hire overtime to do to bring in, or we wouldn't be able to do a lot of those community events without the volunteer support. They do provide it, for example, just, this, 2 weeks ago when we had the 4th of July, yes, the duty crew is there, but we had 6 volunteers that gave up their 4th of July to come in and help staff for the parade and the block party and also at the fireworks show. So I think it's a real key piece of the department to have those volunteers still. And we're one of the, I think we're, from what I've heard, I think we're the only one now that is going to be taking volunteers. A lot of the departments, Fall City, some of the other ones, it was already a low number, but they've all stopped recruiting. So we might be the only ones left in King County that are still having volunteers. Or by the end of 24 that are not recruiting anymore. Lastly, we talk a little bit about emergency management, what we did this year for emergency management. Again, part of the fire department budget, and the emergency operations center, obviously, is located in the fire station. We had no full activations in 2023. We did have some partial ones for snow events, high heat, cold emergencies. And really the partial activations is just an awareness. I'm paying attention to what's going on. I send emails out to the city staff saying, hey, we're monitoring it. And then if we need to, we can bump up to a full activation. So we did have a couple of partial ones, but there was no full EOC activations in 23. Some of the major accomplishments for the emergency management in the EOC is we upgraded a lot of the equipment in the EOC and the associated meeting rooms. We're still working on that in 2024. We're still going to add some monitors with some grant funds in the meeting rooms just to make it bring it back up to technology, make it more compliant. A big one is we restarted the CCAS group, which is the volunteers that are basically the communication volunteers. That program had kind of died off a couple years when we lost the 2 sergeants from the police department that kind of ran that group. They both retired and there was no succession planning for someone to take off. So the group kind of fell apart, but in the last year in 23, it started and continuing in this year as we have a really dedicated group of individuals that are working on restarting that and bringing it back. Right before this meeting, I met with their lead to go over some of the budget stuff that we're working on replacing this year. So I'm really excited about bringing that group back and working on that communication group. And then the CEP, which was just sent into, it was just completed just a couple weeks ago to where we're sending it to the state to review it to see if there's any suggestions they have before we bring that to the group as a final check off on the comprehensive emergency management plan that we've been working on this year. So that brings us to the end. We were having the discussion in the beginning about, and like I said, this hasn't been published yet, so we can make changes if there's anything you see. Because this was a 2023 report, we didn't have a deputy chief in 23. That's why I left it off. But if you think it makes sense, I can easily add him back in there because if somebody reads it now, they might want to see. So I kind of went back and forth on whether it should be in there or not. So if you think so, we can easily add him back in. We can add him in as the deputy chief before we publish and send it out. So that's what we had, what we put together for the annual report. Is there any questions I can entertain right now?
Well, excellent job. Thank you for sharing this with us. I would like to see your deputy chief listed here with a footnote of hire date so that people know that he's new to the crew, but yeah, I think having that present is very good. I also want to acknowledge the volunteers because this fire department was started with volunteers and it's quite a dedication. And you look at the numbers, it's 80 plus hours a year. Each one of them is giving to this, and Council Member Cotton and certainly some people have given a lot more in excess to that. And Council Member Cotton can attest to that in her almost 20 years of volunteering. 22 years. Thank you for correcting. So I think that that's really important. I'm going to open it up to the council members for questions or comments. If you have any.
Not that I have any.
We're going to do this as part of the public safety report in the next meeting, or what's the plan? And
It would be
going
up to you
forward.
if you want me to do the same report in front of the council, we could look for that, a spot, we can add it to the agenda. I know, well, we don't have our meeting 1st of August, but I believe I could work with the city staff to see when it fits. I don't know if
Okay.
we got, I'd have to look at the agenda for if we have a full meeting already on the 22nd, so it might need to wait till August, but I'd work with the staff to find out if you'd like it to brought the same talk, I can bring forward to the full council if you want. I just gotta look for a spot for it.
Defer to the mayor and the administration for finding the right place. I mean, the timing is not necessarily critical that we need to do it at the very next meeting, so we can push that to where it is. But I think it's important that the public sees the work of the fire department, the value of having our own fire department, and making sure that we highlight that. Councilmember Cotton.
Absolutely, I agree with everything you've said, Councilmember Watton. Question on the, back on the stats or the responses and stuff. The difference between the distribution and concentration, like for the ERF, because there are some differences in those times. And I get the time first unit on scene. But then the concentration, the response time of the emergency response force.
Part of that has to do with the difference between 90th percentile versus the average response time, which is what we reported in our annual report before, was just the average.
Yeah.
So that's why you'll see, some of the tables that are used for the accreditation use the 90th percentile.
Yeah.
So you're gonna see that a little bit, that's where you're gonna see the number be a little bit different. And then it depends on the area that we're responding to, whereas the accreditation times are based strictly on the city numbers and not necessarily on our total, they only count on the numbers inside the city, whereas
Yeah.
the average response time that I use up above is the area as a whole. So
Okay.
they're good. That's why you're gonna see a little bit different between the two.
Oh, okay, okay.
And it has to do with, some are, the average response time of the 642 is a basic number, whereas some of the accreditation stuff, you take out some of the outliers. Say, for example, if you respond non-emergency, if you change your response en route. So that's why you're gonna see a little bit difference is some of those outliers are scrubbed out in the accreditation information.
I think that's a very good point, and it would be worthy to have that as a footnote, because as I was looking at this and having seen it just for the first time as well tonight, it kind of stands out that are we really doing what we need to be doing? But if we have an understanding that it's 90th percentile and the reasoning behind using those numbers rather than the average.
Okay.
Because the two are very, very different.
Yeah.
And you do an exceptional job. I just want to make sure that somebody picks up this document and looks at it, a taxpayer, and it's like, wow, they're drinking coffee. Fire station, which, by the way, I was in Paris and we were staying right next to the fire station. And across the river was where the church burned. And I was watching them respond. It took them at least 5 minutes, if not 8 minutes, to get the engine out of the station because one of the firefighters was out on a run. And it's like, oh my gosh. It's like optics sometimes are really important. But anyway,
We're probably on the furthest away from the city.
yeah. So
Our guys do that, but they go around the station, so they're not very far away.
yeah,
Stay on the
exactly.
station
It's like,
grounds.
And we
ooh,
have a
my
treadmill
goodness.
too, so.
Okay, any other comments?
Thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, well, I'll speak with at the next staff meeting, we'll look for a spot where we can fit it in, where it's a little bit lighter council meeting, where the clerk decides that it fits for the council meeting to get the full report.
We appreciate that.
Thanks.
We seem to have had full meetings lately. All right, anything else, Chief? All right, excellent, very well. As a future item, we're going to be talking about the FAA restrictions at Snoqualmie Falls, but not tonight. Is that my understanding?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up, Councilmember Christensen. Is there any, I got a slew of emails while I was gone, and I think that was in the pile of emails. Is there a particular timing issue where we need to make sure that this is on the docket for 2 weeks from today? Or,
It would be nice if we could get it heard on the sooner side because they would like us to discuss it, but I understand that we'll be out. I think there isn't a public safety meeting the first week in August.
yeah,
The joint one.
yes, we're having a joint meeting and I don't have the date and time. It's like a 4:30 meeting on a Tuesday over at North Bend. Mr. Chambliss.
Which happens to be National Night Out.
Oh, goodness. Okay, we may regroup on that one. Anyway, I do believe I may have canceled our next meeting in 2 weeks, so it'll be a month out if I remember correctly. Clerk Garrett, could you help confirm that? Or maybe I sent that to Clerk Dean.
The next meeting is, allowance will be on.
Okay.
Atlanta for the accreditation.
Oh, that is correct.
Cancel the August
Yes,
5th, I think.
It's the 5th. Yes. So with that, our next meeting will be on August 19th, and we will get together with City of North Bend for the joint meeting. And if we decide to move that to the 20th, we'll notify everyone. So, yes,
August 19th, yes,
I'm sorry,
August 19th.
August 19th currently is our next meeting. With that, we have come to the end of agenda, and I will call for the adjournment unless there's any objection. Hearing none, we stand adjourned at 5:46 p.m. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thanks.